Alrighty. Let's start here. Antonio Brown has a foot issue. And I feel
so
like
does Rex Ryan, but they're two different ones.
I feel like it's a good thing to talk about at the top of the show, because we've been talking about a lot of manscaping issues lately. To be honest, there's a lot of people out there, men and women, but a lot of men who could use just like some common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you are someone that has seen the light.
What do you mean, seen the light?
Well, you used to, not be as into the manscaping thing. And all of a sudden, you've started to really pick it up.
Well, I think my wife just bought me a bunch of new, nice clothes, and that's why.
Well, that helps. But, the facial hair.
Oh, yeah, the facial hair, yeah.
The haircut.
The hair. I have not gotten my hair cut in like 2 months, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, so you've just been scaping.
I've just been scaping, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I have been taking care of the facial hair a little bit better.
The lawnmower that you got from Manscaped has been really coming in.
I don't think I actually claimed a lawnmower, to be honest with you.
Well, as someone that uses the lawnmower, I can attest. It does a great job. Antonio Brown probably could have used some of this, one of
those stones that you rub your feet off with, right? Like that's got to be number one.
So have you ever done? He said that he got frostbite from doing cryotherapy. Have you ever done cryotherapy?
I've never done cryotherapy. The most I've ever done is basically the
cold tub.
Cold tub, yeah.
Yes, I've never done cryotherapy. For one, because it takes time to go to a place, and then you pay money to sit in a.
Sounds awful.
It's just not something that I am going to do. Now, I could see if you were an athlete at the highest level. Okay, we're going to do the story from the Cincy Y at the front of the show here, because this is something that actually pisses me off. If you are an average human being and you work out, you are not a pro athlete.
I think that's by definition.
You're just a person who is trying not to look terrible, and so you go to the gym.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't need thousands of dollars of equipment and treatment to make sure that your lazy ass can go to the gym every day. You don't. You don't need to go to cryotherapy. You don't need those huge sleeves that go on your legs that help flush out all of the lactic acid. LeBron James does.
Yeah,
he does, because he's a pro athlete. You don't. Just because you squatted for the first time in 6 months, and you're going to do it next week and then the week after, you don't need this.
See, my wires are crossed right now because I live this. I go to the gym in pajama pants sometimes. Yep. I go to the gym with fuzzy sweatpants sometimes. Matter. I wear a long-sleeved San Antonio Commander shirt to play basketball in. I don't have basketball shoes. I play in sneakers. I literally live this because of exactly what you said, which is, I'm not a pro athlete. I once was a college athlete, but even then I said, I'm a Division II football player. I don't need practice cleats and game cleats. I just need cleats, all this kind of stuff. I don't need gloves for practice and games. I just need one pair of gloves. But then I sometimes get made fun of for wearing the fuzzy pants to the gym.
Well, the fuzzy pants are hilarious looking.
I know.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean,
so they've crossed the line into you're ridiculous as opposed to you're perfectly understated for the gym.
I'm sure you could have just picked shorts instead of the fuzzy pants.
Yes. However, laundry,
that is fair. But you are far. You're far to one side of it. Mm-hmm. There are people that work out probably about as much as you do that are all up on Instagram telling people how much they work out and how their bench press is, increasing
there was somebody
by
at the
10
gym
pounds a week
this week with the aforementioned leg sleeves who yelled, "This is my gym," after he won a 3-on-3 game at the Cincy Y. And it was an intense 3x3 game. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, the legs. By the way, the leg sleeves that I'm talking about are the ones that you use for recovery. Have you seen these?
No.
So they're like these.
We're gonna get complaints on YouTube about just talk about damn football.
Stop. But if you're one of these people, you know who you are. You're not special. You're not a pro athlete. So stop talking about yourself like you are. Antonio Brown, however, is someone that, look, if he can get any sort of good out of cryotherapy, should probably do it. The fact that he's doing it without socks on his feet is hilarious. And it seems as though you're not actually really able to get frostbite from being in one of those chambers for that short amount of period of time. So now I'm very curious.
I honestly think he just doesn't want to practice, which frankly, if
Did you see the picture of his feet? They look horrible.
Yeah, but that's not because of frostbite. That's just because he doesn't take care of himself.
So I'm with you. I think that's why.
I think he doesn't want to practice, and he's like, he's too afraid to do what Brett Favre did, which is just like hold out until training camp's over and then come back.
All right. So that was our introduction. By the way, if you want to be the opposite of Antonio Brown and can keep yourself in good shape, you should probably head over to Manscaped, get yourself a lawnmower, get yourself some of the wonderful tonics that they have for making sure that you're smelling good, feeling good, looking good. I don't know. I use it. It works. Make it happen. Next up, pass interference penalties.
Yeah.
Through 2 weeks, your thoughts?
People are edging out about this. And I remember last preseason when everybody was getting called for those hits over the middle of the field on run plays, and people were freaking out about the integrity of the game. And funny, like there was higher scoring the first 8 weeks of the season, but I don't think it was because of like these penalties. It was because of just like quarterbacks being good. I think there's been a lot of offensive pass interference penalties called just anecdotally watching the games. There's been a lot of defense. And then there's also this, review structure that I think has people really, really freaking out. And I think it's overblown. I think by the time the season starts, the referees are going to act basically how they've always acted, plus or minus a small term, and we'll be fine.
It's preseason for everyone.
It is preseason for everyone. We got to get Terry McCauley on the podcast.
We do. We should get him on the pod. I'll see what I can do. I'm sure he would love to opine.
Yep.
He will dive into all of the nooks and crannies of these things that we probably never thought of before. He posted something last night that I thought was interesting, so you can go check it out if you want, at SNF_rules. There's nothing from the preseason that I'm going to overreact to, and it's certainly not going to be this. So I think just people should chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
Kicker traded for a 5th-round pick. Your thoughts?
I mean, it's ridiculous. Also, by the way, 2 days later,
he's really good though.
Right, exactly. We know that he's really good. Unlike any other position, we know that kickers, project one season to the next very stably. No, I mean the issue is, and it always has been. I think our friend Ethan Young, who now works for UCLA, published this a while back. But essentially, the idea is that there's just not enough value in understanding, kicker projections are just simply too noisy to say, okay, there's a huge difference between a guy drafted in the 5th round and a guy drafted in the 6th round, right? A guy drafted in the 6th round versus 7th round versus UDFA. A kicker, his biggest asset is his replaceability, in my opinion, because the fact of the matter is, anytime we've seen, and there's really only been a couple kickers where this isn't true, but the Vikings fell into it with Daniel Carlson. They fell into it with Blair Walsh. Now they're probably going to fall into it with Kyer Vedvik, right? But the idea is that, we bought into a kicker, and now he's struggling, and unlike any other position on the roster, you can't just put him on the bench. He's the only guy on your team, so you have to ride or die with him. And we've seen the Vikings lose games because Blair Walsh couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and they had just drafted him and extended him, right? So you have to be able with kickers to discard them, and you're far less likely to discard a kicker if you've spent draft capital on him.
Okay, if you were willing to cut your losses,
this would be the second consecutive year the Vikings have used a 5th-round pick on a kicker they might cut. So this is crazy. And the other thing, and I don't think this is also...
What if he's the next Justin Tucker?
And again, anytime somebody says that, I always say the problem with Justin Tucker is that he makes kicking field goals more enticing. So you're less likely to go for a 4th and 1 at the 40 because you're going to be like, oh, Justin Tucker can nail one from 57. This is great. And it's you give up an opportunity to score 4.5 points for the opportunity to score 2.5 points. And it's again, there's really no upside to this at all. If he becomes the next Justin Tucker, you're going to have an offense like the Ravens. Congratulations.
That was beautiful. I'm not even going to say anything. I am on the same page. That's why I asked that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more I can invest in field goals, well, I'm going to do it.
Well, and the other thing with punters, Michael, but here's the other thing with punters too. Oh. If he's a brilliant punter, he is going to add value to your team, but in a way that I also think is negative EV in the long run.
No one cares.
If you are like, hey, we can live off of defense and special teams, you're going to make shitty decisions in the offseason.
Really look forward to your 8-8, 9-7 season.
Exactly. So
the big takeaway from the preseason Super Bowl, which occurred last night with Boog and Tess, no Whit.
Whit plays tonight, right? Whit.
Yeah. Was Raiders Cardinals, and now Kyler Murray's bad. Did you know this? I
didn't. Whit plays Saturday, but yeah, sorry. That's how little I care about this Cardinals game. Interestingly for them though, and this gets to our point, I'm not worried about Kyler. I am worried about the fact that they wanted to go into a season with Robert Alford starting at corner for them, and then B, Robert Alford breaks his leg. We're going to see, Byron Murphy quite early for them, and the depth in the secondary is just atrocious. So if you're thinking about Kyler Murray and you're thinking about the over for Arizona, I don't think we've ever recommended it. I would say it's one of those I'm going to leave because I can totally see Arizona getting to 6-7 wins, but it's going to be a grind for them simply because their defense is going to allow 30-35 points a game, and I don't know, putting all that on a rookie's shoulders. I can certainly see him acting like Cam Newton did in 2011, where you're putting up great stats for a terrible team and you finish 7-9. But I could also see it where he is just so far behind the 8 ball in every single game. We don't see the best of him the way that we did for example, Baker last year for a pretty good Browns team.
Yeah, I'm not overreacting quite as much just because Robert Alford was so bad last year. I don't think this makes really that much of a difference. Now, if the next guy gets injured, sure, but not losing sleep over Robert Alford. Patrick Peterson being suspended is something, certainly, because he's actually good at football.
Jordan Hicks is a good coverage player at linebacker. That's good.
But I'm not worried about Kyler at all. In fact, based on last night, what I would be doing is if I believed in the Cardinals, now is when I would be trying to invest. So I would be trying to get my fantasy draft to happen this coming week so that I can tell everyone how bad Kyler is and then draft him. That would be my takeaway. Any other players that stuck out week one that you think matter? I have one.
Okay. I still think, and this combines the first two games, I still think Drew Lock is just a rough one, right? I think that draft pick, I think Denver's going to be in a position to draft a quarterback again.
Yeah, at least they didn't take him with the 6th pick.
That's right. And he was their second round pick, and their first second round pick looks like a great player in Reiser. Right. So, but
here's the one that I have, which is Mr. Washington in Pittsburgh. A guy who there was a lot of, wow, this guy's great pick for them last year, does absolutely nothing, is a guy that just gobbled up deep passes at Oklahoma State with Mason Rudolph. He looked fantastic. Now, it means absolutely nothing. It was Josh Dobbs throwing him the ball, but at least he didn't. You would expect a guy in their second year, this is kind of like NBA Summer League. If you see a guy that's in his second year in NBA Summer League and he's not tearing it up, that's a problem. So if I'm a second-year wide receiver who is a first-round pick and I'm not out there making things happen, that's a problem. And he did make some things happen. That would be big for the Pittsburgh Steelers to regenerate that receiving core, have it be more widely dispersed, because I think what they want to get away from is what they had with Antonio Brown, where it's like we're going to feed him 180, 190 targets every year. We want to be more multifaceted, and if he can be a contributor, if Deontay Johnson can be a contributor, a guy who was real shifty, ran great routes in college. Only Hollywood Brown had more targets with a step or more of separation than Deontay Johnson. That could be big for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, and not only that, but they also have, Dante Moncrief coming over, and he's a veteran that can.
That's right. I forgot about my boy Moncrief.
So And again, it's the same thing with the secondary. You're not saying I'm putting all my eggs in Moncrief's basket, all my eggs in Deontay Johnson's basket, or James Washington, but I'm going to take a few bets and hope that 3 of those guys work out, including Juju Smith-Schuster, Vance McDonald at tight end. I think that team, and we wrote about this a couple weeks ago, I think that team is underrated in terms of you're looking at playoff props to win the AFC North. That's a team that I'm looking forward to seeing. Again, as we talked about we're going to talk about with pressure versus, quarterback versus O-line. Big Ben gets rid of the ball quickly. A guy like Johnson, shifty underneath the coverage. Washington over the top to sort of beat teams deep. I think has a potential to be a good receiving core, even though Brown is now gone.
All right, the last bit of news, which we have to talk about, in large part because you took this player to be a part of your franchise going forward, and did not have any qualms with the fact that he has a malady of injuries. And this is Andrew Luck.
Yep.
Andrew Luck is apparently in danger of missing the first week 1, potentially more time, with this mysterious calf high ankle issue. He had a wrap on what looked to be his ankle more than his calf. And this feels eerily similar to the shoulder deal where it's like, no, he's resting, he'll be fine, and then all of a sudden he's out forever. Jacoby Brissett comes in and plays for your Colts. You're someone that has ballyhooed the Colts left and right. You thought they were a great sleeper team for the Super Bowl this year. How do you feel now?
I mean, I like the Colts longer term than I do like this year, particularly against the market.
Oh, nice.
I think that they're over.
Good pivot there.
Yeah. But, I mean, it does show like as far as backup quarterbacks go, Brissett's probably one of the best in the league, right? So that's like a good like insurance policy for them. They don't have to go out and take a draft pick to sign him. They don't have to start Scott Tolzien and all that kind of nonsense. I am worried though. I think anytime like it's just not clear, the team can't come out and say, look, he's got like Liz Frank injuries out for 6 weeks. I'm a little nervous, right? Because we've seen this song and dance before with him. Ballard has done a good job of assembling a roster. I think it's in a good position. I do think their defense will regress a little bit this year, and it'll force them to get some personnel there. But yeah, I mean, I think right now, and our AFC South article is coming out next week, but I think just as a preview to that, I do think the Colts are overvalued in the market right now, even with the Luck news.
Well, because no one really knows. And I think a lot of people are saying, well, I'm going to hedge that he's going to play. Well,
and I don't think that they've earned an over-under of double digits or 9.5 even, I think is reserved for truly great teams. Like truly, I mean, I think it's reserved for the Saints. I think it's reserved for New England, Kansas City,
San Francisco,
the Rams, the Niners. Yeah. And I just don't see it, right? I would put a projection more around 9 for them as the median. And so if you're somebody who
honestly feels high given what we know.
Right. But I also think that division isn't very strong. So the question is like, if they take a step back, are they still good enough to win in a division where Houston has the league's toughest schedule according to our metrics? Tennessee has Mariota on his 3rd offensive coordinator in as many years, and the Jaguars are the Jaguars. Like, I still think they could win that division, but it might be one of those where they win it at 9-7, and you cash the under.
Jacoby Brissett just took a sack.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, he's stood in the pocket forever, right? Because
my man takes sacks like fat people eat donuts. It's incredible. Here's the thing with the Colts that I think is underrated. Jacoby Brissett was bad when he last played, contrary to what some idiots have proclaimed. Mm-hmm. He's not very good.
He's good for a backup, but yeah, he's not a good starter.
Not very good overall relative to the other players that are playing quarterback. However, Frank Reich is a great offensive coach. And so if we're ever going to see a situation where a guy comes in who's not very good, but the team still manages to play well, it is going to be with a guy like Frank Reich. Now,
the 92 Bills too.
If we think back to last year, Andrew Luck through the first 5-6 weeks of the season was sort of like having a backup quarterback because he was coming off this injury, he wasn't throwing the ball downfield, and yes, they struggled mightily, but I think Frank Reich puts together an offense that at least allows them to potentially be successful. Whereas normally you just be like, well, I'm going to punt.
Well, the difficulty is that I think if Reich has an entire offseason to plan around having Brissett as his quarterback, it's probably a far better outcome than planning on the fly, which is what they did in 2017 prior to Reich joining, and then last season I think they were planning on having Luck, but even then there was some uncertainty there, and it took Luck a while. T.Y. Hilton's still one of the best receivers in the league. I think their 2 tight ends are really solid. Obviously, Paris Campbell they drafted. They have running backs that I think are multifaceted, and none of them are really going to be bell cow type players. So I think that they're a good offense moving forward, and I think if Brissett comes in, like let's say Brissett has to start 4 games, I think he probably wins 1 to 2 of them, and that's okay. I think it's the issue when he has to start 12 or 15 games like he did in 2017, where I think they'll struggle.
Regardless, it would suck to not have a healthy Andrew Luck, because
for the league's sake,
if I think about this upcoming season, it's, wow, we have a chance to have maybe the best set of quarterbacks. This is going to be great. Last year was awesome. We had all these new young guys. Now we know more about them. They turned out to be pretty good. You've got a couple guys coming back from injury. And it would just, got Andrew Luck's a guy that could be, he's a legitimate MVP candidate if he's healthy.
Yep.
Alrighty. We are on to a couple of division previews, and we're going to start with the NFC South, which is one of the more interesting and fun divisions because there's a clear favorite, a Super Bowl contender. There is a team that is not the favorite, but has been closer to winning a Super Bowl than any other team in this division. There is a team that is not the favorite, is kind of mired in mediocrity, but has a superstar that came close to winning the Super Bowl. And then there's a team that at the bottom of the division where we have no idea. Jameis Winston, Bruce Arians, this amazing wild card that if everything clicks together, and you should all check out Timo Riske, PFF_Moose article about matching up passing concept with quarterback with Jameis and Arians, they could be an amazing offense. They've drafted a bunch of defensive players. So there may not be a more interesting division than the NFC South. Let's start here. Who's the most important player in this division in your mind?
I think it's also who has been the most valuable player, which is surprisingly Matt Ryan. In my opinion, and again, this is not a slight on Drew Brees. It's more of a slight on Matt Schaub than anything. But I think if Matt Ryan misses a snap, if Matt Ryan misses 1 game this year, the Falcons' probability of making the playoffs is cut in half. Just because Matt Schaub is such a downgrade. That offense is that offense struggles at edge case things like red zone and third downs and stuff like that we don't appreciate how good Matt Ryan is. Whereas Drew Brees is a brilliant Hall of Fame quarterback, I think, no doubt about it. But I think if he misses a game or two, they could probably go 500 for the same reason I talked about Brissett with Bridgewater. Like, I think they're similar backups. And the other thing about it is I think Brees has. It's hard to say because he's a Hall of Famer, but he's asked to do things that are more replicable than what Ryan does, right? The shorter passes, get the ball out quickly. Not to say that it's easy to do, but it's just probably more replicable than what Ryan does. So I think Ryan's the most important player in the division, and I think it's close, but it's not as close as people think.
Damn it! I did not think you were going to say Ryan. I was going to say Matt Ryan as well. The point that you make about the edge cases for the Falcons is a really important one, because if you're going to say Ryan, then what I'll go ahead and say is Dan Quinn, because the difference between Matt Ryan and Drew Brees is very slim. They're both very good quarterbacks. And now I think most people would say, oh, well, Drew Brees is certainly better than Matt Ryan, and he certainly was last year. But over the course of the last few years, they have both been tremendous. And Matt Ryan squeaks past Drew Brees. You can go read the article on PFF.com, and we'll go into it in more detail. But Drew Brees has the benefit of Sean Payton, who makes the right decisions more frequently than Dan Quinn has. And I think Dan Quinn, being a defensive guy, has struggled with this a little bit, and I don't think it's because he's not trying. But that Falcons team, has kind of accrued this identity of I'm timid. And they shouldn't be timid because they have maybe the best quarterback wide receiver duo left in the league. now that AB and Big Ben and Gronk and Brady are no longer together, and yet they don't push this advantage. Sean Payton pushes the advantage that he has Drew Brees. He says, look, if I have a chance on 4th and 1 to keep Drew Brees on the field, I'm doing it.
Which is crazy because they actually have a good defense compared to the Falcons. The Falcons should be the team that acts like the Saints.
But they don't. And so to me, if Dan Quinn is able to put himself in the frame of mind where we are a great offense and we're going to play like it, then the Falcons can be the best team in this division once again because their quarterback is that good. Because everyone's talking about Michael Thomas. I'd rather have Julio Jones, right? And as great as Alvin Kamara is, he's still catching passes, at the line of scrimmage. So he's not someone that's all of a sudden going to necessarily push them over the top. And their defense was so bad last year, right, that if it just regresses a little bit, Dan Quinn's decision-making here, I think, becomes huge. There's that 2nd and long thing that we talk about all the time. They ran on 2nd and long at the 9th highest rate.
I know.
You know what their yards per pass play was on 2nd and long?
Let's say 9.
It was like 8.8.
Yeah.
Their yards per run play on 2nd and long was 3.1.
Stop.
It was an absolute travesty.
Yeah.
So I think Matt Ryan, Dan Quinn, the most valuable duo, and I don't think
the
it's
thing
close.
that we wrote about this in the article,
or the most important duo. Sorry,
we wrote about this in the article. Julio Jones simply doesn't play as much as some of these other guys do, and so when you look about his yards per route run, you look that's I think inflatedly high in some sense because he's not on the field all the time. And I know they're trying to mitigate his injuries, but they are, as a result of some of those things, one of the most predictable teams in the NFL at times. When you have, I think it was who was his name? Like Hardy. When you go 22 personnel and the wide receiver is not Jones, I'm sorry, the other team knows you're going to run the football.
It's a disaster.
And it's not like they have, Austin Hooper, I think, is an underrated tight end, but he's no Tony Gonzalez. So you're not going to win in those situations. And I think it sounds bad, but I think Julio should just be out in the field more and they should just be less predictable. I think that they were hurt a little bit by the fact that, now that Tevin Coleman plays for the Niners, they had 2 running backs who were pretty good, talented players. And in 2016, Shanahan used them in efficient ways out of the backfield, throwing them the football. And so then in 2017 and 18, Sarkisian used them, but in dumb ways. I think hopefully as they go into this season, the Ito Smiths and the Devontae Freemans are used again as backfield, passing players as opposed to rushing players. Again, those edge cases, so they can squeeze those down and be more efficient on them. I think we're going to see Matt Ryan have sort of an MVP caliber season in a way he did in 2016. I'm not as optimistic maybe as some because Dirk Cutter's had his history before, but I think Cutter's an upgrade over Sarkisian certainly.
Yeah, it's Matt Ryan's the offensive coordinator.
You'd hope.
That's really
what
the thing here. And their red zone efficiency, much maligned, really is not something that's that big of an issue. There are far bigger systemic issues, right? They kind of figured out, look, we need to throw the middle of the field, we need to throw in breaking routes, we need to get rid of this fade BS, which is absolute garbage. And they did do that. Okay, so I think we've answered the next question already, which is if the favorite doesn't win, kind of why is that the case? And let's spin it one rung down the ladder here, which is, okay, if the Saints don't win and it's not the Falcons, you've got the Panthers and the Bucs here. I think I know where you're going with this one.
This is where we're going to make a decision that's different than most, I think.
Who's winning and why?
I think it's Tampa Bay. And I think Tampa Bay because, there's a lot of positives about Tampa Bay, right? Jameis Winston has this nature about him of throwing the ball in places that Bruce Arians likes to utilize. And I think as much as Jameis has struggled at times, I think he has the potential and his positively graded throw rate. Tampa Bay's expected points added on passing plays has been in the top 10 the last 2 seasons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a good offense. And I think if they turbocharge it with Arians and get some reversion to the mean defensively by drafting a lot of coverage players and just flat out being healthier, that team can win 7 or 8 games, maybe even 9 or 10 if the other teams fall off. Carolina, weirdly, right? They talk about getting off to a 6-2 start and they ran bad for the last 7 weeks. Well, their 6-2 start was pretty fraudulent. Yep. They won against the Giants on a 63-yard field goal at home. They won against the Eagles despite being down 17-0 in the fourth quarter. I'm trying to think of their other games. They had some luck along the way, and then things got unlucky down the stretch with injuries to Cam, but they haven't addressed a lot of the issues that they had last season, which is A, Cam still has to play this way to be effective. B, they're relying too much on a running back offensively, and C, they can't cover anybody, and their secondary's young and has some potential, but thus far has not really shown anything in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't think this is even close. I think the Bucs are solidly better than the Panthers, and a lot of it gets back to so Jameis Winston seems to finally be in a situation where if you said, hey, Jameis Winston, your quarterback, design the perfect situation for him, this is it. Mm-hmm. Cam Newton, on the other hand, and people misconstrue this all the time, but I've seen a bunch of, Cam's throwing it shorter, and look, he's so much more accurate. Isn't this great?
And that really was more of a narrative than anything that was really true, right? I mean,
yes. And that is frustrating because he's actually not that accurate. It's just that when you throw shorter passes, you're going to complete.
You're more accurate than you once were, but not compared to league average rates.
And you're not generating. It doesn't matter if you're accurate. It matters that you generate value. That's what you need to be worried about. And so what they should be looking at is not, what gets us completion percentage highest? It's what's going to generate us the most value, and that's throwing the ball at or near the sticks, which they need to do more of. And they also don't have a whole host of receivers that are necessarily proven. Now, I think it could be the case that those, that DJ Moore comes through and ends up being that guy. But as of right now, way more confident.
Right. This is where folks like us are sort of fading the training camp narrative. Curtis Samuel's the next, coming of Percy Harvin. DJ Moore. DJ Moore is sort of this, second year receiver who played well a season ago, but will have to improve his game a little bit. They really don't have. The big, Calvin Benjamin was supposed to be this player that could sort of box out folks and be that sort of X receiver that does all those things. I don't see that on their roster now. They do have the potential to have a good receiving core, but Greg Olsen was the sort of fulcrum of that entire passing game for years, and we've seen him steadily decline over the years. So that, again, is a tough one because Cam being sort of more of a down-the-field thrower, Greg Olsen, one of the more athletic tight ends we've ever seen in league history, really did elevate that. He's, of course, getting older, and as we know, not quite as good as he used to be. So the question, to me, the interesting thing is, if Christian McCaffrey falls off at all or gets hurt, you're no longer seeing this variance that Carolina got in the early part of the season where their offense was effective because of a running back and his skill set. Anytime I see one thing for a running back, I tend to fade it. So if we see McCaffrey being the most valuable running back in the NFL last season, I'm going to sort of regress that a little bit. And then what is that offense? I mean, it's really tough to see.
Bad is what it is.
Plus Norv Turner.
Yes or no question here, because we're going to move on. Can the Bucs win the division without one or both of the two other good teams falling off?
That's a really good question.
That's more than one word answer.
Sorry. No, I don't think so.
Okay, I agree with you. We're moving on to the NFC West. So we'll start in the same way that we did with the NFC South. Most important player in this division is whomst?
I don't think it's close. It's Todd Gurley. Oh, sorry. I'm supposed to be serious. I also don't think it's close. It's Russell Wilson.
Okay.
What say you?
I said one word answer on the previous question. You're allowed to give me more here.
I mean, if Wilson doesn't play, that team's 0-16. So, and if he does play, they're lined at 8.5 wins. So, I think that's probably the most important.
So, I don't disagree with you, but I think the most important player in this division is Jared Goff. And here's the reason it's Jared Goff. If Jared Goff is the mean of what we saw the last, 4 games of the season, and his efficiency, if he's an average guy instead of a top 8 guy, all of a sudden, I don't think there's a team in that division that doesn't feel like they can win it. Maybe the Cardinals, because they're, just like, who knows. But Kyler Murray's a guy that has the ceiling where if he hits it, all of a sudden we're like, holy cow. So Jared Goff is the guy, and it's kind of a Sean McVay, thing too, because they're so tied to each other. But if that offense is not more multifaceted, if Jared Goff isn't able to overcome some of the deficiencies that he had last year whenever a team played, with 4 guys back there and he all of a sudden couldn't hit that deep crosser, if Cooper Kupp coming back isn't the panacea that we had hoped it would be, then all of a sudden that division is wide open.
I think Jared Goff is the most important player in this division in terms of long term. The composition of this division alters substantially if he's not the franchise quarterback of the Rams. And I 100% agree with you there. If for this one season, I think Wilson is, because obviously, and it says more about what I think of the Seahawks than it says what I think about the Rams. I think the Seahawks are not going, our projection for them, probably 8.7 wins. So a little bit over the Vegas over under, not enough to bet the over with the juice. But my thing with them is that they're not a good team anymore. They last season are, the reason we liked them on the over was, they had Wagner, Baldwin, Clark, Earl, Russell Wilson, more than half of those players are gone. They're basically a team with a bunch of players that have to prove themselves and a really great middle linebacker and a really great quarterback. And so there's a lot of situations where I think this team is somewhere between 9-7 and 7-9, in which case the 49ers and the Cardinals are more of a factor in that division. And the only thing that sort of long-term is a question for me is whether the Rams are an arm's length away from all 3 of those teams. And if Goff is not the player that he's supposed to be, then the answer is they're not, right?
The only thing that I'll push back on there is how can the most important player in a division be a guy that his own team doesn't trust on 2nd and long?
Well, that's a good one.
So the Seahawks,
they're protecting him, right?
The Seahawks on 2nd and 8+ ran the ball more than any other team. We've gone over this many, many times, but it's just so suboptimal to do that. One of the sort of kind of macro level data points that I think is useful is if you have a drive with a 2nd and long play that is a run versus a drive that has a 2nd and long play with or more than one with no runs, the run drive results in a touchdown 3% less often than the ones that were all passes. So it just really hurts your chances of picking up first down and ultimately scoring. And they do that more than any other team. And that's when you need to leverage Russell Wilson. He was so great on 3rd down last year. It's just hard to imagine that being replicable. So I don't disagree with you in his importance. I just think he should probably be used more, and that would increase his importance.
Yeah, and I think that combined with the sort of loss of talent that they've had across the roster for multiple seasons is probably a reason why, if you're looking at the delta in wins, it's him. If you look at the long-term outlook of the division, it's Goff, because the whole complexion of the division changes if they need to move on from Goff.
So if the favorite doesn't win, that's the Rams. So things go a little wonky. Are you willing to put your stake in the ground that it's the Seahawks that claim the division?
No.
Because I'm not.
No.
And I actually think, I don't want to say this because I'm a Niners fan, and I try to keep my expectations where they should be, right in the middle. But the ceiling for a team like the Niners, where it turns out that their coverage players aren't terrible and they can be 23rd as opposed to 32nd. The offense is such that they could have one of those seasons where, I don't want to say the Falcons when they made it to the Super Bowl, but they have all the components. They have some really great players that can make, George Kittle's such a special player, right? They have a bunch of young receivers that hopefully Kyle Shanahan can put in the right position. And then Jimmy Garoppolo is the type of quarterback where you could see that ceiling.
But the people aren't, I don't think people are concerned so much about the Niners offense other than Garoppolo emerging and being the player that at least you think he is. But the defense, right? If we look at the 2016 Falcons defense, what was their characteristic? They were young and fast. The 49ers' current defense is young and fast. Warner from BYU, he's not Deion Jones, but he's kind of the similar player in that he's fast and he's a smaller linebacker. Devondre Campbell, the issue was, and the Falcons weren't brilliant in the secondary that year. They had some positive variance. Brian Poole played well for once. Robert Alford played well for once. That's certainly not out of the possibility for the Niners. And then the Niners have a better front four than the Falcons ever did in 2016.
Sure.
And they run the same defensive scheme as the 2016 Falcons. So there's all of those. Again, there's
a reason I made that comparison. It feels
right. It feels the same. And the thing is, if you're ahead. The thing about defense, and this is why it's unstable, and this is why we fade it all the time, is if you are a defense that's confident that your offense is going to score on every possession, you can just act differently. You can rush the passer with more reckless abandon. You can jump routes. You can do all those things because if you give up a stupid touchdown, your offense is going to have your back. It's really in those situations where the offense isn't good that it sort of highlights defensive efficiencies because the defense is playing tight. They know they can't make mistakes, and those mistakes are magnified in the broad part of the game. If the Niners offense takes off and becomes a top 5 unit in the league, their deficiencies defensively are going to be hidden a little bit. And they're going to get more than 2 interceptions like they got last year. They're going to get sacks, and those sacks will come on 3rd and long when another team knows they have to drop back 7 steps and come back from behind. And so that's why defense is unstable, and that's why you should fade it. And it doesn't matter as much as people think because it really depends upon the offense so much.
Well, look, if I know I have a great defense on the other side, I'm going to try to score less.
I'm gonna run the football and be more inefficient. Yeah.
That's the best because I know that's the retort from people. It's well, yeah, but if I have a great defense, then I know I don't have to do as much as on offense.
I reject the premise, frankly.
Listen, buddy, you got to score points to win this football game. I
reject the idea that you have a good defense 9 times out of 10.
Sure, that's the other huge issue. Okay, anything else with the NFC West? I feel like that was way shorter than.
Like I said, I think this is really interesting in that the Rams last season were this perfect candidate of a team that went from 4 wins to 11, I believe. And as you said about the Browns, it's a lot harder to go from that 11 wins to 12, but they did it. And so the question then becomes, is there regression this year? It's probably less likely than it was last year at this time. But I do think this is a 1-team division in an NFC that I think the wild card is going to come out of somewhere else, frankly, unless the Niners emerge and become that team. I think that we thought they were going to be last year, frankly.
Here's an interesting question: the next NFC West team to win a Super Bowl will be who?
Yeah, I think you got to go Rams.
Interesting. I don't think it's as close. I think there's a lot of question mark with Jared Goff. With what they end up doing with Jared Goff, if they end up paying him a ton of money, do they handicap themselves? Is he worth it? Sean McVay, who I am a huge proponent of because I think he does a great job of all of the culture building aspects that are so important, and he's a real sharp guy, but he's got to make some improvements from an offensive standpoint, and especially with a decision-making standpoint. If they're going to be conservative on 4th down, I'm not putting my I'm not taking that team. So
I think from a scheme perspective, though, they can evolve because he's already evolved.
Sure.
When he was in Washington, that offense
correct.
was very tight end friendly, and it became a 3 wide receiver offense in LA. I think they might go back to a little bit more. They might use Gerald Everett, for example.
They should,
yeah, because he's actually good. And I think from an X's and O's perspective, I think he'll adapt. The issue is going to be the
I said
the
this when everyone was having a circle jerk about their using 11 personnel. My point was, he's just using the best players on his team.
His only mistake is playing Higbee more than he should, frankly.
This is that's what a good coach should do, is play the best players. So, yes, Gerald Everett is good enough to play. Higbee is a guy that gives you some flexibility, right? So if they come out light and, open up the opportunity for them to get an easy 5 yards on, 1st and 10 running the ball, he gives them that kind of versatility there. So they can keep those guys on the field and just, confuse the defense. But he's got to make the right decisions on 4th downs more frequently, so as does Dan Quinn. All right. Sort of last but not least. So let's let's leave if all of PFF's like forecasts come true, what will happen for another week. And let's talk about the great article that you wrote, because you should go check it out. It's about quarterback and offensive lines, who owns the pressure rate. And what we mean by that is it a trait of the offensive line, or is it a trait of the quarterback? Who is most responsible for the amount of pressure that they feel? And I actually think we talked about a player who is an interesting case study for this, because I think common knowledge or common belief is it's the offensive line, because they're the people blocking the pass rushers.
Yeah, and this has been hinted at by folks before. I think in the article I cite, Josh Hermsmeyer had a tweet about hits and sacks. I think Football Outsiders did it a while back, and but we have pressure data, and pressure, of course, is one of those things. If you look at pressure rate for an offensive lineman, pressure rate for a defensive lineman, you're talking about R-squareds of 0.5, which is like unreal for NFL players, and so. Like, we're clearly capturing something about offensive and defensive linemen, that whether they're good or not. Mm-hmm. But the real question is how much does it affect the play? And you look at across the league, you look at like Peyton Manning, right? He really simple, like, just looking at like the years where he played and he didn't play, his pressure rates were suppressed, right? Dan Marino, back when he played for the Dolphins, he went an entire season being sacked 6 times. It's just some of these players like process this thing. Tom Brady, I believe, had like, I can't remember the numbers, but in 2007, his pressure rate, invited was pretty low. Matt Castle comes in for 2008, same offensive line, high pressure rates. 2009, low pressure rates. Teddy Bridgewater with Minnesota, same bad offensive line, takes pressure rate at a rate of 50%. Bradford's like 15% lower than that in 2016. So you're looking at it like, is this something characteristic of the QBs? So then I went in and did basically a look at the play-by-play data, and the answer is yes. I mean, the time to throw is more affected by the quarterback's pressure rate invited, or the quarterback's time to throw historically than that of the offensive line. And I think that makes some sense, because there's just some instability about the offensive line, and the 5 starters for one. But the other thing is like just quarterbacks just have a nature about them, I think.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. And you should go read the article so that you can get the finer points here. But sometimes we view athletes as these super adaptable robots.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're not.
Right.
Just like you and I are not. Right. If I go to eat lunch somewhere, regardless of what restaurant I go to, I feel pretty confident that I know what you're going to get, ballpark, and I know what I'm going to get, ballpark, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't matter what restaurant I go to, because I am the way I am and you are the way you are.
Right.
Russell Wilson is the way he is. So their offensive line got way better last year, right? He was under pressure 2-3% less often. Why? Now, I'm not saying that the pockets he faced were as destroyed, but what I'm saying is it's a trait of his that he's going to hold on to the ball for a little while. So he's going to invite that pressure at that normal rate, or that rate that's consistent with what he's done his whole career. Now, it wasn't 45%, which it was earlier in his career, but it was still at 40, which is right around where he has been the entirety of his career. And so that is a useful thing to know, because I think it's comforting, right? It like tells you that there is some continuity among the way that these quarterbacks play. They're not just system fits, right? There are things that the scheme can do. There are things that the offensive line can do. But ultimately, it really does come down to, what is this quarterback? Who does he want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some obviously room for scheme adjustments. We saw with Andrew Luck, he was a guy who held the ball long in the pocket. But I think it also is telling that the coach of the Colts thinks that Andrew Luck has control over this, as opposed to his offensive line, because really, I mean, when you're building an offense, you sort of have to, I think, test or have your offense sort of pliable to this idea that offensive linemen are going to get hurt. and you can't always rely upon Tyron Smith to sort of like stonewall a defensive end every single play. You have to have this sort of nature about it. We're going to be a team that throws the ball quickly. We're going to be a team that drops back 7 steps, like a la the Rams, all that kind of stuff. And and that really is dependent upon the quarterback's nature. And what we've seen is even when guys switch teams and switch coordinators, it's still pretty stable. I mean, there are the Andrew Luck changes, there are season level changes, but they're not as drastic as the season level changes of offensive linemen on teams.
What this kind of brings us into is a looking back again at the clean versus pressure discussion, because obviously play from a clean pocket is more valuable because your expected outcome is far superior. But what this also tells us is, well, if I know a guy has had a lot of clean pockets, I think Ben Roethlisberger, I think you cite him in the article because he's been pretty consistent at having about 75% of his dropbacks in a clean pocket, which is the highest rate in the NFL. That's something that is going to be more resistant to perturbations on the offensive line than maybe we had thought originally. So a guy like Roethlisberger, I kind of expect to sit in that same bucket as far as how many clean pockets he'll have and how many pressured pockets he'll have. And I know about what he's going to do from a clean pocket. Guys who invite a ton of pressure, they're in situations where, like, I don't know.
Right. I mean, that's why, when you're looking at like people trying to project who the top fantasy quarterback is going to be this year, they all say Deshaun Watson, and like I like Deshaun Watson. I think he's a good young quarterback. But the fact is his pressure rate is in the 40s, and last season if you take out Nick Foles, because the sample size, was the highest passer rating quarterback under pressure. So like if that even becomes the league average rate, he's going to struggle relative to last season. And then so there is a chance like, if in a circumstance where Watson was average under pressure for years, I can see the high variance argument for him to be the top fantasy quarterback. But since we've already sort of seen, okay, he already invites a high rate of pressure, and he was really good there, and this is what you got this year. If you same with Kirk Cousins, like people talk about the Vikings, getting better on the offensive line, which is a little shaky, but also like Kirk Cousins won't face as much pressure. Kirk Cousins was a top 10 quarterback in passer rating under pressure last season. So if you even put that towards 16 or 17 in the league, he's going to actually get worse. And that the increase in offensive line efficacy is not going to impact him as much as people think, because again, quarterbacks carry their pressure rates with them. So it's a really interesting way to look at quarterbacks as inherently volatile or stable, as opposed to inherently volatile or stable based upon exogenous factors like their offensive line. And
the last thing that I think is worth talking about is we made this argument is not too dissimilar from when we talk about coverage versus pass rush, but it's kind of it helps you look at it the other way, which is, okay, if a quarterback is going to determine more so than the offensive line how often he invites pressure and how quickly he throws the ball, well, then he's also telling you which side of the defense is more important, right? And that is, well, look, if the quarterback decides to throw it early, doesn't matter what the pass rush does, right? What does matter is who's on the other side of that pass, and that's the receiver and the coverage player.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when this will come out, but we did another study about basically time to throw being that variable, really, and coverage and pass rush affecting it, right? And we found that basically coverage and pass rush affect time to throw about equally. Coverage actually makes people hold on to the ball longer, as you can imagine. Pass rush makes them get rid of it more quickly. And so those are equally effective, but then the problem is hanging on to the ball quickly is actually worse for an offense generally because pressure comes in.
Like hanging on quickly.
If you can live in a world where you assume no pressure ever happens, holding on to the ball longer is better. But you can never assume that. So, so that again is a sort of another feather in the cap of, okay, coverage is more important than pass rush, because coverage makes you do something that is on balance worse.
Yes.
Pass rush makes you do something that on balance you can actually make into a pretty good offense, which is the Patriots, throwing the ball quickly against the Chiefs and the Chargers for one.
The value, it's not good enough to simply look at impact. You also have to, the rates, right? You've got to look at what that actually means for the team that's playing. The Patriots were ridiculous.
Yeah, and the thing is like teams adapt, right? So it's far harder. So what's easier to do? Tell your receivers to get open more, or to throw, or to like, okay, I'm going to stand in the pocket for longer. You better beat the guy in front of you. And coaches think this way. Coaches are like, well, we just need to execute better. Antonio needs to get open on that 15-yard dig. Well, it's like, well, that's actually harder to do than just to simply scheme an offense where things are going to be open more quickly, and it doesn't depend necessarily on your guys winning so much.
Well said. Go check out the article. It's on PFF.com. Bunch of good stuff on PFF.com, including coming soon. Next week, I have been told.
Allegedly.
PFF Green Line will be live. It's going to be a lot of fun this year. We've got NCAA. If you want to learn more, there is an article that explains all the stuff that'll be on there. But big highlights. NCAA games are going to be up there. That is a lot of games. Your Saturday, all of a sudden, my Saturday went from boring to exciting very quickly. We've got a couple of new tweaks and cool things that are available on the page that I think you'll be able to leverage, but all the same good stuff from last year: spreads, totals, money lines, all the kind of unique PFF-based metrics that we had last year. So whether you're going on it to actually bet on games, or you want to use it for your pick'em league, or you want to use it for fantasy, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. And I would also mention that the Super Contest, if you're someone that plays that, is something that you should probably sign up for. You got to go to Vegas to sign up, but I've got a way to make you feel better about it. So you have to go sign up through a proxy service, and if you are going to do that, you should use footballcontest.com. I have used them. We have used them for the past, I think, 4 years. Maybe 3 years is how long I have used them. They're fantastic. Maddie is just a tremendously timely person. So when you set up a time to go meet him, they will be there. They make sure everything is taken care of. It's very easy. And then they offer a bunch of great ways for you to keep track of how you're doing during the season. It's very easy to submit your picks every week. So you get to make a trip to Vegas, and it's pain-free, and then you get to play the Super Contest every week, which is you pick 5 games against spread, winner gets a crap ton of money.
And that's I think where a lot of the value is in the Green Line tool, is that like you see how the spreads have changed.
Yep.
And oftentimes in the Super Contest, those lines are stale. So you will see like, okay, well, I was offered -3 in the Super Contest, now it's -4. Like I know where the market's sort of going, and so again, this is all about sort of risk reward sort of things. If you need that pick,
because you're playing against other people that know the same thing.
If you want that pick to be a more than likely a win to keep you up pace with the market because you're ahead by a few games, you act one way. If you need to be contrarian, you'll act a different way. It's certainly part of the I could think the benefit of that tool.
It helps you learn very quickly why, if you're going to place bets on games, to do so earlier.
Yep,
that is for sure. All right, that's all we've got for this week. Please be safe out there. Preseason week 2 is very dangerous. Don't die. Don't get too caught up in what you see. In fact, be like, well, not you, but me, who is not gonna watch the games. I'm gonna work.
Same here.
I'm gonna prepare for week 1. That's what really matters. We'll see you guys. Peace out.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.